Hello and welcome to Right Sports Talk. My name is Zach, and since we are officially in the month of July, the last official month before any NFL football comes back, I thought I would go over some of my sleeper teams for this upcoming season. So, to me, a sleeper team is a team that either didn't make the playoffs or a team that is really being overlooked going into this season, but I think could compete for a playoff spot or at least be in the hunt at the end of this upcoming season. So to start off, I've got it split up into AFC and NFC. Start off with my first AFC team. I've got the Las Vegas Raiders. The Raiders went 8-9 last season and went 5-4 under then interim head coach Antonio Pierce. Since then, they have hired on Antonio Pierce to be their full-time head coach. He is a guy that the players really enjoy playing for, so I think this is a really good move. The players like being around him. Seems like they want to play for him, and they got better last season after he was hired as the interim coach. So the big reason that I like the Raiders going into this season, mainly because of their defense. So they had a good defense last year to end the season, but weren't really talked about all that much. They have obviously Max Crosby, but other than that, nobody was really talked about. And in free agency, they went out and they signed defensive tackle Christian Wilkins to put in the middle of that line with Max Crosby on one side and Tyree Wilson, their first round pick from last season, on the other. They've also got some very talented linebackers. So that front seven, I think, is going to be very good. And I think that front seven being very good is going to help out their secondary, which honestly was pretty good last season. They had Nate Hobbs, who's a very good slot corner. They also brought in Jack Jones partway through last season, and Jack Jones is a very talented corner as long as he can stay on the field. If he can stay on the field, he's very, very talented. As long as he doesn't have go through any injury issues or any off-field concerns, on the field, Jack Jones is one of the best corners athletically that you're really going to see right now. Also, in the draft, they drafted cornerback DeCameron Richardson in the 4th round, and he's another one of those lanky, fast, athletic guys that I really like if they could put him on the other side of Jack Jones with Nate Hobbs in the slot and kind of have a really good cornerback trio right there. Yeah. I think the biggest reason that people aren't really talking about this team is, one, they lost their number one running back in Josh Jacobs in free agency, but I am very excited to see what their young running back Zamir White can do as a full-time starter. He got limited playing time last year when Josh Jacobs was a little beat up, and he managed to average 4.3 yards per carry. I think he's a very good running back, and I'm excited to see what he can do carrying a full workload. They also brought in running back Alexander Mattison from the Minnesota Vikings in free agency, who's somebody that I don't see him as a number one workhorse running back, but he can be a very good role player that can still help out that run game. Also, to address the run game, kind of to help the running back position as a whole, they brought in the 6th round of the draft, running back Dylan Laube, who I really like because I think he's a very versatile player who can contribute not only in the run game, but where he's probably going to be more of a threat is in the receiving game. You can kind of move around the slot. You can throw him passes out of the backfield, and I think he's just a very good young running back that's a very good receiving back and very good at catching passes out of the backfield, or can run routes like a wide receiver. Also on this offense, they brought in tight end Brock Bowers in the draft, who is another versatile player where they can put him next to their other tight end, Michael Mayer, who they drafted last year in the 2nd round. And they can be a very good tight end tandem. Or he can another person that can move out in the slot, and kind of move him around to H-back, just find different ways to get Brock Bowers the football. And he's going to perform well. Also, they still have Davante Adams, who has the potential to be a top 10 receiver in the NFL when healthy and plays a full season. And they have Jakobi Meyers, who I think is one of the better number 2 receivers in the league. I think he's very good. He pairs very well with Davante Adams. Those are 2 very good wide receivers. They also addressed their offensive line in the draft. In the second round, they drafted interior offensive lineman Jackson Powers-Johnson, who can step in day one and be a starting left guard or right guard for them. He played center his last year in college, so he can also play center for you day one. So they have a rookie offensive lineman that can play 3 different positions right off the bat and really help out that offensive line anywhere in the interior. They also drafted offensive tackle DJ Glaze in the 3rd round, and Glaze right now is kind of more of a depth piece, but he's adding a whole lot of much needed depth at the right tackle position. And who knows, maybe he could wind up being a starter. Now, going on to the biggest reason I think nobody's really talking about this team, their quarterback situation. So last year they went through Jimmy Garoppolo, Brian Hoyer a little bit, and then Aiden O'Connell wound up starting like 10 games for them. And he was serviceable. I think he's a serviceable player. He's good enough to kind of keep you in games. I don't think he's going to lose you any games. And then in free agency, they brought in Gardner Minshew. Gardner Minshew is a very similar type player to Aiden O'Connell. He's not going to lose you games. He can help you be competitive in games, but I don't know if Minshew or Aiden O'Connell can really take that step up to kind of take over and win you a game. They're very good game managers, but I don't know if, game on the line, they can go win you the game. So they've got all the pieces around them. Very good defense, really good offensive pieces to be great. If this was a team that had a Justin Herbert or a Joe Burrow or even a Trevor Lawrence, I think you'd be talking about them as a much higher team. You'd be very much talking about them as not so much a sleeper, but as a team that should go to the playoffs with the roster they have. But because of their quarterback situation, they're more of a sleeper that nobody's really talking about. But they're a team that I definitely think can make a run at the playoffs and possibly, get one of those wild card spots. The next team that I want to talk about is the Los Angeles Chargers. The Chargers went 5-12 last season. They fired Brandon Staley before the end of the season, and then they brought in Jim Harbaugh as their head coach for this season. Now, in the offseason, they did lose 2 key wide receivers in Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, and they also lost their key running back, Austin Eckler. I don't really see Austin Eckler as much of a loss. He doesn't really fit what Jim Harbaugh likes to do on offense. Jim Harbaugh has a very run-heavy power run. We're going to run the ball 400 times a year type of offense, and he really likes to play hard-nosed defense. He loves to play old style, run the ball, and play really tough defense type football. So I don't really see him losing Austin Eckler, who wasn't really that type of running back to begin with, as much of a real big hit to the team. I don't really see them losing Keenan Allen and Mike Williams as that much of a hit to the team based off of what they like to do, based off of what Jim Harbaugh likes to do offensively. They brought in Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins in free agency. Gus Edwards had a very good season with the Ravens last year, especially, as type of a goal line short yardage back, which, Jim Harbaugh is probably going to use in that role a lot. And J.K. Dobbins, if he can stay healthy, is, I think, a very talented running back. So hopefully he'll be able to stay healthy and really contribute to this team. They also, addressed the offensive line in the first round of the draft, bringing in Joe Alt to put him on the right side of the offense, put him at right tackle with their all-pro Slater at left tackle. Two very good offensive tackles that can maul people in the run game and be very good in pass protection. I think Quentin Johnston should be able to take a step up in his second year, and hopefully be more of a focal point on the offense. They've got Joshua Palmer, who's very good, and they drafted Ladd McConkey out of Georgia in the second round, who I think is going to be a very good slot receiver, and could possibly lead their team in receiving. So I think on offense, they're good for what Jim Harbaugh likes to do, and they're going to win close games by just running the ball, wearing teams out, and playing good defense. On defense, they still have Joey Bosa, they still have Khalil Mack. Both of them are really getting up there in age, but I think they have a really good defense for what Jim Harbaugh wants to do. So they don't have to really be the best defense. I think they have good enough players that they can hold teams to low-scoring games, and with the run game, they can grind out the clock and score enough points to win. It'll be possibly be a lot of close games, but I think the Chargers can win some games this year with Jim Harbaugh as their head coach and with Jim Harbaugh style football of just running the ball and playing good defense. One of the biggest problems for the Chargers as well as for the Raiders is the division that they play in. In the AFC West, they have to go through the Chiefs. The Chiefs are pretty much a lock to win that division. The Chiefs coming off back-to-back Super Bowl victories, have won the division every year since 2016 or 2017. It's been a long stretch. So the Chargers and the Raiders are most likely to compete for one of the 3 wild card spots. And in the stacked AFC conference, that's going to be really difficult to do. Moving on, my next team that I want to talk about is the Indianapolis Colts. The Colts went 9-8 last season, and they lost the last game of the season to keep them out of the playoffs. One big reason why I like the Colts is they've got, they're going to have hopefully a full season of a healthy Jonathan Taylor. They had him for, almost the back half of the season last year, and he played really well. And they should hopefully get a full season of Anthony Richardson at quarterback. And I'm very excited to see what that'll look like. He showed flashes in the few games that he did play last year before his shoulder injury. But, he's not the greatest, most polished passer right now. But I think with the offense that they like, offensive style they'll run, be able to give the ball to Jonathan Taylor a lot. And Anthony Richardson can make a lot of plays with his arm. He kind of reminds me of a young Jalen Hurts. Well, he was still developing as a passer, but he can still definitely make plays with his legs. They've also still got Michael Pittman. Josh Downs should be going into his second year, should develop more as a receiver. They've got, a good offensive core. They didn't really bring anybody in free agency, but they didn't lose anybody either. So they kept, their core players together, which I think will definitely help them. They also have a good defense that came on more at the end of last season, so hopefully they can build on that. One of the things that I think actually helps them is the division that they play in. So they play in the AFC South, in which you have the Tennessee Titans, who you don't know what they're going to look like. Tennessee Titans have a first-year head coach. It's going to be their first full year with Will Levis as their starting quarterback. They just lost Derrick Henry in free agency. So you don't really know what they're going to look like. You've got the Jacksonville Jaguars, who, again, Jaguars looked good most of last season and then just collapsed at the end of the year. So you don't really know if they're going to be able to consistently play well every week and be consistent for the whole season. The Colts' biggest competitor is they've got the Houston Texans to deal with. So the Texans beat them last year in the last game to win the division. and they're a team that has only gotten better by bringing in Joe Mixon and Stephon Diggs. I think if the Colts can, play well against the Texans, I think the Colts can beat the Colts. The Colts can beat the Jaguars. Hopefully, they've had some struggles in Jacksonville over recent years, but I think they can beat the Jaguars. And if they can, stay competitive with the Texans and maybe squeak out, one win against them, then they're a team that I think can compete. Can kind of compete for the division, but definitely compete for a wild card spot. Moving on, the next thing I want to talk about is the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Steelers went 10-7 last season, and they are the only team that made the playoffs that I really want to talk about as a sleeper for this season. So last year they made the playoffs as a 7 seed. They just kind of snuck in there with their 10 wins. One of the big reasons I have them as a sleeper is because of the division that they play in. They've got the Ravens, who made the playoffs last year and with the AFC Championship game. You got the Cleveland Browns, who made the playoffs last year after playing 5 different quarterbacks throughout the season, and Joe Flacco carrying them to the playoffs. And then they've also got the Bengals, who, even without Joe Burrow, were competing for that last playoff spot last season, even while Joe Burrow was injured. So now Joe Burrow coming back, you have to think, the Bengals are going to be better. So they're going to, compete for the playoff spots. If you think of, 3 teams from the AFC North that can make the playoffs, you think the Ravens, the Browns, and the Bengals. But I really like the Steelers. I like the fact that they brought in Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. I think both of them are an upgrade from Kenny Pickett at quarterback. If Russell Wilson is their starter, I think George Pickens is going to have a very good year. He's the kind of receiver that Russell Wilson really enjoys to throw to. He's the big body, downfield receiver. They've got 2 very good running backs in Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren. The running game's going to be very good. They've always got a very good defense behind TJ Watt. They've still got Cam Hayward, Micah Fitzpatrick there in the secondary at safety. Joey Porter Jr. at corner. They're very good on defense, and I think their defense is going to be one of the big reasons why they win games. I think their running game and honestly whoever they have at quarterback is going to be good enough to keep winning them games. Also, somehow Mike Tomlin has just never had a losing season, so whatever Mike Tomlin does, they're still going to finish at least 9-8. But they're a team that, for some reason in their division, whenever any team from their division plays each other, any team in their division can beat any other team in their division. It doesn't matter how they're playing. You could have a team, that's 2-12 late in the season. You could have a 2-12 team going up against a team with 10 wins fighting for a playoff spot, and the 2-12 team could still absolutely beat them. For some reason, the AFC North, whenever they play each other, just weird things happen, and any team can beat any other team in that division. So I really think that the Steelers are another team that could kind of compete. One of the big reasons why I said a sleeper team was a team that could compete for, a playoff spot and be in the hunt is because of how stacked the AFC is. It's going to be really difficult for teams that don't win their division to make the playoffs because there's only 3 wild card spots. And I think a lot of these teams are going to be really, really close. The final team that I want to talk about for the AFC is the New England Patriots. The main reason I have to talk about the Patriots is because I'm a Patriots fan. I have to bring them up as much as possible, before the season starts. Last season, they went 4-13. They fired Bill Belichick. They brought in Gerard Mayo. They had the second worst offense in the NFL and were middle of the road on defense. And they lost early in the season. Christian Gonzalez, who was seen to kind of be their number one corner, who's their first round draft pick last season, went down with an injury. And Matthew Judon, their best defensive player overall, their best pass rusher, also went out with an injury. So they missed arguably their two best defensive players most of last season. So I think their defense is going to be better this year. Christian Gonzalez is going to come back healthy. Judon's going to come back healthy. They have some pretty good pieces. And they're a team that had 8 of their 13 losses were in one-score games. Most of those losses fell solely on their lack of offense. The Germany game against the Colts where they lost 10 to 7. The game against 10 to 6 against the Colts. The game against the Giants where they lost 10 to 7 and missed a game-tying field goal. The game against the Chargers where they lost 6 to 0. Their defense gave up 6 points and they still lost just because of their absolute inability to do anything on offense. This is a team that went out and addressed their offensive, woes and added some pieces on offense that are, I don't know how good they're really going to be, but they're definitely better than what they were last year. This is a team that is favored to win 0 games this year. And they possibly got the worst year to get a last place schedule, because the last place teams that they have to go against in their last place schedule are teams that can compete with their division. And they have to play some really tough divisions. They have to play the NFC West this year on their schedule. So that's the Seahawks, the Niners, the Rams, that are really tough games. And just even within their own division, there's a possibility that 3 teams from the AFC East could make the playoffs. So you have the Buffalo Bills, who won it last year. You have the Miami Dolphins, who went to the playoffs last year and almost won the division until got to the month of November and December, and they just collapsed, but still made the playoffs. And then you also have the New York Jets, who have kind of gone all in around Aaron Rodgers to make that playoff and Super Bowl push this year. Like, this is kind of their window to where they should be a really good team. So even though I think the Patriots got better, I don't know how they can compete with the rest of their division, but they're definitely a team that, they could string together some wins, and you could look in, the back half of the season and be like, oh, the Patriots are actually kind of coming along now, and they're, competing for a playoff spot. Those are my AFC teams. Moving on, just want to talk about my some NFC teams. The NFC, I've got the Falcons, who went 7-10 in 2023 and hired Raheem Morris this offseason as their new head coach after firing Arthur Smith. And so they're a team that they brought in Kirk Cousins in free agency to help out their offense, to hopefully be able to get, their key offensive pieces that they've been building the last few years the ball. They're really hoping that bringing in Kirk Cousins can be that spark for Drake London to have his breakout year, for Kyle Pitts to have his breakout year, and for Bijan Robinson to just kind of continue to build off of his rookie season. So I think Atlanta, their offense is really set up to succeed. Their biggest concern right now is their defense, but I do like their secondary with Jesse Bates and AJ Terrell. I think those two are very good. But their defensive line is a little subpar. They didn't really address that at all in the draft or in free agency. But I definitely think that they are a team that can compete and play well next season. After them, I also have the New Orleans Saints, who went 9-8 last season. They're a team that I think is better than people really want to talk about or really think about, just because Drew Brees is no longer in New Orleans, Sean Payton's no longer in New Orleans. They're not really thought of as a good team, but they were, one win away from winning their division last season. They're a team that has Chris Olave, a very, very good wide receiver. Has Derek Carr, who I think is better than people want to give him credit for. They've got Alvin Kamara, a running back. They've got Kendall Milton, who came along last year, late in the year. They've got a very, very good defense. And they're a team that is just kind of under the radar every year, and nobody really thinks that they can do anything. The biggest reasons that I bring up the Falcons and the Saints kind of is the division that they play in the NFC South. Obviously the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have won that division the past 3 years, and all those years it's kind of been close. At least the past 2 years, it's been very close to where if they, let one more game slip, they could have, not won the division. There's, 2022 season, the Buccaneers won it with an 8-9 record, and the other three teams were all 7-10. Like, this is a very, very close division. I don't think the Buccaneers got that much better than any other team in the division. I really think that, with the exception of the Panthers, any team can win the AFC South. I think, the Falcons added enough pieces, especially on offense, that they could do it. The Saints are quietly good enough that I think they could do it. So I think either of those teams could really make a run for their division, and that's probably the only way a team from the NFC South makes the playoffs, is if they win their division. The next team that I want to talk about is the Seattle Seahawks. The Seahawks went 9-8 in 2023, last season. They're a team that I think is very good. They went to the playoffs 2 years ago. Geno Smith is still their starting quarterback. I think Geno is, good enough to win games. They've also got Sam Howell behind him now, who I also think is pretty good. But he was put in a bad situation in Washington, where they didn't have, an offensive line to protect him, and he took too many hits. But I think in Seattle, they don't really have that issue. I think whoever their starting quarterback is, which right now it is Geno Smith, no question about it. So I think they have quarterbacks good enough to win them games. They've got a good offensive line. They've got Kenneth Walker, a very, very good running back. They've still got Tyler Lockett, a very good veteran receiver. DK Metcalf, a big play, big threat receiver. They've got Jackson Smith and Jigba, a very good receiver going into his second year that can be very productive for them. Their offense, I think, will be very good. Their defense is good. They brought in Byron Murphy in the draft. They've got a very good secondary. They're just a team that, if they played in a different division, could probably win their division most seasons. But their biggest issue is they have to compete with, obviously, the 49ers, who are the defending NFC champions, and the Rams, who were in the playoffs last season and look to still be very good and can also compete for the playoffs. But I think the Seahawks are a team that nobody's really talking about. I think they're a team that can definitely win games this upcoming season and absolutely compete for a playoff spot. The next team I want to talk about is the Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings went 7-10 last season. They started off slow, lost the first few games, then started looking good, and then Kirk Cousins tore his Achilles. So they went through last season with Josh Downs and Nick Mullins for the most part, and just didn't play very well. This offseason, they brought in Sam Darnold in free agency, and they drafted J.J. McCarthy in the first round. So, two guys to compete for the starting quarterback job. They also still have Justin Jefferson, who, when healthy, is arguably the best wide receiver in the NFL. They've got Jordan Addison, a very good second-year wide receiver, who can hopefully make that step up. And they brought in Aaron Jones in free agency, a running back who, if healthy, is a very good running back. I think this offense, although they did lose Kirk Cousins, I think they won't really take a massive step back compared to how they were, a couple of years ago with a healthy Kirk Cousins. And this defense is also very good. This defense that, kind of isn't talked about as much as, other defenses, but I think they're a defense that is good enough to win games. They're good enough to keep you in games. They're not going to go out and wow you, but, they're not, their defense doesn't look to give up too many big plays, and they don't give up, a whole bunch of points. They just, kind of contain teams enough that I think that this offense can do enough to win games this coming season. Even if they have Sam Darnold at quarterback or rookie and J.J. McCarthy, I think they're going to do well. They do unfortunately have to play in a very good division with the Lions, who went to the NFC Championship game last year, and the Packers, who made the playoffs as the 7th seed and wound up beating the 2 seed in the wild card. I think the Vikings, have enough on their team to, make a run at the playoffs and have a very good season. We'll see how that goes. The final team that I want to talk about is the Chicago Bears. Chicago Bears went 7-10 last season. They have since gotten rid of their quarterback, Justin Fields. They drafted Caleb Williams first overall. They drafted wide receiver Rome Odunze 9th overall. They brought in Keenan Allen. They have a good offensive line. They brought in a new offensive coordinator, who was the former offensive coordinator in Seattle and quarterbacks coach in Seattle when Geno Smith had his, since Geno Smith has been in Seattle and had, his past 2 good years. So they brought in an offensive coordinator that is to, help a quarterback succeed. The Bears have built their roster this offseason to win. Like, they have put every piece that they could really around Caleb Williams to help him succeed in his first season in Chicago. So, big reason I have them as a sleeper team is because they really should be succeeding. They really should be winning games. Like, they have built this roster to win. They have their quarterback that picked number 1 overall, who they think can be a generational talent and can turn this franchise around. They, have good wide receivers and DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze. They brought in DeAndre Swift in free agency at running back. They've also got Khalil Herbert, who's also a good running back. They've got Cole Kmet at tight end. They've got a good offensive line. They have a very good defense. The only question mark on this team right now is if Caleb Williams could be the guy at quarterback. And if Caleb Williams is the type of quarterback that all the experts say he's going to be, then this is a team that is going to make the playoffs. If Caleb Williams comes out, if Caleb Williams underperforms I think this is a team that will implode on it, that could possibly implode on itself. So those are my sleepers for the upcoming season. Let me know in the comments teams that you think are sleepers or teams that you think can make the playoffs. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Until next time, see ya.